A late one, but a great one. Hey guys, back at you drinking an ale 8, delicious, wonderful, always drink ale 8 if you've got the chance to. Might be expanding further into the south. If you're south of me, you might be able to see it. Pick it up if you go to a gas station and find it, or anywhere you can find it. It is the best soda, period. So, what I mean when I say a late one but a great one is I'm late in doing my review of The Fly. So I'll go ahead and get started on that. Sorry about that. I got kind of busy yesterday. Had to go to a job interview, go do some stuff, take some calls, go to work. So I really didn't have time to watch The Fly. Plus I've been making more of these 100 greatest horror films of the insert decade here, according to the internet. I'm just becoming really fascinated with that. But anyway, next up in the Cronenberg Double Feature, we have The Fly. This is a remake of the 50s sci-fi classic. The first thing to note here is the bombastic musical score provided by Howard Shore. From the first few notes, we know this movie is going to be one for the ages. It is reminiscent of scores from the golden age of Hollywood. It's just wonderful, lush, kind of a precursor to Shore's work on Lord of the Rings, which is really cool. I love Lord of the Rings. From the opening titles, we immediately get set down on our two protagonists. They're at a party, talking back and forth, and from this very moment, we know who they are. You've got Seth Brundle, played by Jeff Goldblum. You might know him from Jurassic Park and Independence Day. Well, you definitely know him from that, because who hasn't seen those movies? And then we've got Veronica Quaife, played by Gina Davis of Beetlejuice and A League of Their Own and 1,000 other things. Brundle, we immediately know he's like socially awkward. You can maybe even see a little bit of his narcissism creeping in. And then you've also got Veronica, and she's just she's needy, and yet I think she kind of longs to be dominant in a relationship, so that's kind of interesting. Of course, plays 100% into Cronenberg's themes of like sexuality and all this different stuff. But what soon becomes apparent is just that these traits really mix well for them. Like, very soon they kind of get into a romantic relationship. But by the end of the movie, it just totally blows up on them. The supporting cast is really good here as well. A number of really good characters. I think John Getz as Stathis Borans. Crazy names in this movie. Really crazy stuff. But I really enjoyed it. I'm going to give another sip here. Delicious stuff. But Stathis Borans is here. He's John Getz. You might remember him from like Blood Simple and the second Fly movie, which I haven't seen. I'd really like to see that. And he kind of just seems like a pretty simple jerk. But he gets a lot more complex throughout the movie. If you watch the special features on here, you can really see what John Getz is trying to do with the character. Really cool stuff. Really quick aside here, really good Blu-ray by, I think this is, it's 20th Century Fox. Really good Blu-ray here. Got a commentary, a bunch of featurettes and documentaries and stuff like that. Sorry, gotta close something there. Just really cool stuff. Tons of really good things. Very good film transfer. The sound is great. So definitely pick up this Blu-ray if you got a chance. You can probably get this for like $7 or $8 online. Plus shipping. So definitely check it out. I got it as a Christmas present one year. So another thing just that's kind of remarkable about The Fly, its lack of like cinematic obviousness. What I mean when I say this is that the camera's not really showy. It's kind of Howard Hawksian in that it's not trying to show you that, oh, this is a camera. It's more trying to blend into the real world, trying to really highlight the characters and what's going on in the movie, the plot, the special effects especially. giving these characters a chance to flesh themselves out, not really using the camera to do that, just kind of capturing things is what the camera does. So you've got that. I think that's really interesting. That's Mark Irwin again, who did The Dead Zone. He was cinematographer on New Nightmare with Wes Craven. Really, really good stuff. So this makes for a film that I think focuses more on the characters, plot, and special effects. It's really cool. So next, I think we have to focus on the really great special effects that I just mentioned. Great stuff, created by a crack team of specialists. Sort of star of the show is Chris Wallace. He does all these creature effects, and he's known for like Gremlins and Arachnophobia. Starts off really simple. The great thing about both the script and the special effects themselves is how they sort of chart this progression of Brundle into Brundlefly into just 100% man-fly. It's crazy, really cool stuff. The special effects are goopy and nasty, and it's a perfect example of the 1980s way of doing things. It's slimy, bloody, and real. That's how they did it in the 80s. That's how special effects, I think, should always be done in horror movies. So definitely check it out, if only for these horror effects, the creature effects, the nasty stuff that goes on here. The final thing we might want to talk about is the writing. If I'm being as strict as possible, I mean, there's a few early incidences of bad dialogue. Kind of leads me to believe that the case with the Dead Zone is kind of the case with all of Cronenberg's movies. It's kind of, when Cronenberg's kind of setting things up, he's not 100% there, but once he gets his plots going, he just, there you go. Everything is just right on par. I guess that's probably a big problem with a lot of his movies. I'm going to have to check out more to know. I've watched a little bit of, what's the name of the movie? Dead Ringers. Dead Ringers kind of, I think, has this problem as well. Dead Ringers kind of meanders a little bit as well anyway throughout most of the movie, at least up to the point that I've seen. But that seems to be a big problem with Cronenberg's movies and his writing style in general. A little loopy up top, but a lot of great stuff once it ramps up. So ultimately, that doesn't really distract that much. As for the characters, nearly everyone's great. The cast does a great job bringing them to life. Goldblum is really good, and it makes this sort of outlandish concept seem really real. His characterization kind of mixes in fly-like traits. It really brings that screenplay to life. So, like The Dead Zone, it's got some noir elements as well, namely kind of this garish lighting, the very colorful lighting and emotional moments. That's a big part of it. It's also kind of got this outlook that's very nihilistic, which I think is also the case with, sorry for shaking that, The Dead Zone. So both The Fly and The Dead Zone kind of have these noir elements that are nihilistic and that sort of Cronenbergian point of view. And kind of to lead into that, the message kind of is the same as a lot of Cronenberg movies. It's kind of muddled. Not everything is for sure. And in some ways that's really interesting, but in other ways it's kind of for me. So I've got a lot of notes here I'm kind of reading here, but a few things I wanted to mention is that it's kind of a danger of science movie, but it's also kind of a sex is death story. It also focuses on the flesh, which is something that Cronenberg focuses on in a lot of his movies, I've come to understand. Ultimately, the movie is kind of a love story, so it kind of pulls all these things together into a love story. The love story kind of gives backing to it kind of gives backing to the value of people. So people are kind of valued here more than in just sort of a 100% nihilistic way. It's that they are very valued. I know I've been repeating that a lot, but it kind of mixes this meat puppetry view of life with like this value of people that's brought through love story. It's kind of hard to articulate, but I think that what I'm trying to say is that Cronenberg's got a lot of things going on here. You can cherry pick what you want out of it, or you can just kind of let it be crazy. I kind of like doing a little bit of both, so that's kind of what I've done. And mostly I think it's just shown that the movie's got a crazy point of view. As far as any kind of theological or philosophical grounding for the film, God's not mentioned, but I think the film can't exist in a world without God, especially since the sort of intelligentsia are looked upon as, like, essentially immoral, which is a moral judgment, and you can't make a moral judgment without an inherent moral law. And the emotional people are sort of looked upon as inherently good. This is a sort of more soft point of view that would lean more towards maybe a deistic or theistic point of view, I think. If you want to talk more about that, we can talk about that in the comments or messaging or something like that. But anyway, overall, I think the film is brilliant, really well made, technically excellent, incredibly well written, with only a few exceptions. The Fly is filled with great special effects, great acting, and a timeless love story. The film feels mostly timeless, except for a few scenes. I mean, there's a few scenes out that make it look like the 1980s, and also the hairstyles and the style of clothing that they wear is kind of 80s-ish. But mostly, in some ways, at least in some ways, it's timeless. So it's kind of imperfect in a few areas, but few horror films, I think, can attain sort of the complete experience this movie gives its audience. So it's not one of my favorites, just personally speaking, but thus far, I do think it's my favorite Cronenberg film. It's got a little bit of nudity, but not much. Mostly a very good movie, and I've got to give it a 7.75 out of 10. That is above The Dead Zone. The Dead Zone I gave a 7 out of 10. I'm going to give this 7.75. Maybe on an even better day, I would give it an 8. Very, very good movie. I enjoyed watching both of these, going back and watching them, and just sort of experiencing these again. So I may continue this Cronenberg exploration series as I'm going on through these 1980s horror films. I have a number of series that I'm wanting to come up with within the 80s horror stuff. So I'll get to that later. I think the next thing I might be doing is a marathon of Stan Winston related movies, or I could do some Chuck Russell movies, or I could do a John Carpenter marathon, all these different things. But I think I'm gonna leave the video here, end it here, with another good sip of Ale. Cheers, guys. Rock on. If you like, subscribe. Talk to you later. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.